Okay, so this is going to be the first of a couple different videos that I'm putting together for Kansas history that'll provide you with the information that you need to know. Instead of me being up in front of class and lecturing you taking Cornell notes, I've put together these videos that you can watch and take Cornell notes based on them. So that way you can go at your own pace, or if you want to watch them again at home, you can, or if you miss it, you can not just copy off somebody, but you can actually watch these videos and get your own set of Cornell notes. So this will also have essential questions. This will have, again, you'll have to complete the summary, but this gives you all the information that you also need to know to do the activities, but also information that'll be on the test. A couple things I do want to let you know is with the program that I use, the microphone's very sensitive, and because of that, when I click, you'll probably hear it. It's a little loud, but we have to do the best with what we have. So let's talk about this. So today we're going to talk about European arrival. Before this, we talked about the indigenous people that lived in Kansas. And so now we're going to talk about those first people who came here and met those indigenous people. So our essential question is, why did Europeans come to Kansas? And what was their impact on the region? So that is the essential question, and that's going to be the question that we are going to answer in our summary. And please remember that in answering this question and knowing these things in our summary, it's going to help us out a lot in knowing what we need to do on the test. Okay, so the first group that we're going to talk about are the Spanish. So the Spanish had arrived, I think you guys remember Columbus 1492, even though he wasn't Spanish. Got here, and really quick Europeans realized that this was not the Indies, but rather it was two brand new continents. And so really quickly, Spanish came throughout Central, South America and began exploring these regions. Well, one of these famous explorers is Francisco Coronado. And so probably next year in U.S. history, you might talk a little bit about him. You'll definitely talk about him in world history. But just what we're going to talk about, what we need to know is we just need to know that Francisco Coronado was a Spanish explorer. As you can see from the map, he started all the way down there in Mexico, and he went everywhere exploring. He went up through Mexico, there we go, up through Mexico, and then into what's Arizona, and then he went into New Mexico, and then down into Texas, and then eventually into Oklahoma and Kansas. And so the question becomes, why did he come to Kansas? Well, the Spanish were looking for riches, stuff that they could make them, but also their empire rich. And so mostly he was looking for gold. And the main thing that Francisco Coronado is, he was trying to follow these myths or this legend of the lost city of gold. So the city that was made of gold, because he thought, oh, that'll bring a lot of wealth and a lot of money to me. And eventually he thought, oh, that's going to be in Kansas, like following it, getting to this, getting here would be there. And obviously he got to Kansas and there is no city of gold. Surprise, surprise. But I mean, he made it all the way into central Kansas, and who he did meet is the Wichita. And as we talked about before, Wichita were the indigenous people. So remember, they're village dwellers that lived kind of in this central southern part of Kansas. And one of their cities was called Quivira. We talked about how this is a road out in Johnson County. And he did meet these people. And so he is the first European to make it to Kansas and actually meet the indigenous people. That's pretty much it. Is he gets here, finds out they're not City of Gold, and then he goes all the way back. So not really a whole lot of impact, but what it does is that the Spanish at least mapped out the region, and they're going to claim kind of that western part of Kansas as part of their empire, as lands that they own and claim. The last thing we need to talk about is the treatment of indigenous people by not just Francisco Coronado, but the Spanish. And the thing is they treated them very badly. The Spanish, and especially Francisco Coronado, we have the primary sources that says that he had slaves that were indigenous people, that he bought and sold indigenous people. And so they were not very nice. They actually saw the indigenous people as being lower than them. and so it wasn't really a great relationship he tried to establish with them at all. Okay, so the next group of people we're going to talk about are the French. And so the French had claimed lands all the way from Louisiana up into Minnesota, all throughout the Midwest. Later on, the U.S. is going to purchase that land from the French, but this is much later on. And so there's this famous French explorer. I don't even know where to begin to how to say his first name, but his last name is Bourgmont. And so Bourgmont arrives in Kansas in 1724, so kind of the northeastern part of Kansas, kind of I would say like Atchison, Leavenworth area, and he meets the Kaw. And the question becomes, why did he come to Kansas? Well, he came to Kansas with a very different mindset than Francisco Coronado is. He came here because he wanted to establish peaceful relationships with the Kaw and the other indigenous groups, so that way he could be able to trade with them. So his mindset was like, hey, I want to be able to trade with these groups of people, but in order for me to do that, I have to make sure that we have treaties or something that shows like, hey, we're in agreement and we're all on the same side together. And so his approach was very different than that. He wanted these treaties to provide protection and to make sure nothing bad would happen while he's in these different indigenous groups' lands. And so it's a very different mindset. And because of that, he treated the indigenous people very differently. He did not take slaves. He treated them, I guess, as fair as you could think somebody would treat somebody at this time. But he tried to establish peace in a very different approach than what the Spanish did. Okay, so the last thing that we need to talk about is how does this impact Kansas? What the big question is going to kind of come about is who owns Kansas or who owned it? The Spanish are going to claim the western part of Kansas, even though they don't have any settlements, they don't have anybody there. Coronado showed up and they claimed it. The French are going to claim the eastern part of Kansas as part of their territory because Bourgmont had visited some of these places. And that's going to kind of create problems later on for the indigenous people that live here because the U.S. is going to purchase some of this land from the French. And the question becomes is what about the indigenous people that are here? So groups like the Wichita, groups like the Kaw, groups like the Osage who are here and have been here for hundreds of years, all of a sudden this land are no longer theirs. And we're going to see later on, but because of this, other indigenous groups are going to be forced to come to Kansas, and then even later on, these groups are going to be pushed out of Kansas and moved to Oklahoma and other places. The next thing that we need to talk about that's going to really impact people that lived in Kansas are that new goods are going to make their way here. And these are going to be things that are introduced by the Europeans. And the first one of these is horses. Horses are going to drastically change lives of the indigenous people that lived in Kansas, especially those that were nomadic, because these groups of people relied upon following the migration of animals. And because they now have horses, they're able to cover a lot larger distance or area in looking for food and trying to find animals to hunt. So you can kind of see how, before maybe they were on foot, and now they're able to move by horses to kind of look and find animals. But in general, it's going to impact lives for all indigenous people, not just those that are nomadic, just because they're able to travel and move farther and they have something that can help them in doing a certain task. The other thing that's going to change lives for the indigenous people is having guns. There's some argument whether or not guns were necessarily a better weapon than a bow and arrow. I don't really know, but I know that guns are going to change the lives because people are going to see guns as being a superior weapon. Whether or not they were, we could debate that, but the problem is that some tribes are going to want guns to help fight against other tribes that they may not get along with that don't have them. Okay, so that is it for this video. Please make sure that you answer the essential question in the summary. Doing that will really help you prepare for the test, and also this video and the notes that you took will help you to do the assignments that you'll have to do next. If you have any questions, please come to me and we'll address it. Um, if there's anything else you need, please let me know. And thanks. I hope you took really good notes. Thanks. Bye.